The Pacers bench has not been as good this season. Why is that? Is there anything they can actually do about it, or is it injury related? And then, as we're going to do until the trade deadline, lots of trade talk. I want to study teams of the Pacers situation in the past and another rumor coming from this podcast network about the Pacers. It's all coming here on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin, and today, the Pacers play again tonight at home for the first time in a while, and we have to talk about their bench, which has not been very good. The minute they're subbing Siakam out of games, they fall apart. That makes some sense. Siakam's very good, but their bench should be and has been better than this. What's actually going on here? Is there something they can even do about it in their current reality? And then the deadline's in 8 days, 7 days, depending on when you're listening or how you count days. More talk about the Pacers. I want to study teams that are in the familiar situation to them right now from the past, which is finals teams that are terrible the following year. And then I want to talk about another rumor that's come via this podcast network on Locked On Kings. You'll see later. The number one sports podcast network in the world for a reason. We start with the bench. I've wanted to do this for a while and really talk about this because I am very interested in it. The Pacers should be very interested in it. 2 years ago, you'll all remember the first conference finals run that they lost to the Celtics. That year's team had awesome depth, top scoring bench. Every night McConnell was killing. He gets great sixth man of the year votes. They were rocking with that group, top and emerging, all this stuff, right? And then the next year, the bench was pretty good, but worse than that. And Thomas Bryant really stabilized things. It was kind of wobbly to start the season, but they figured it out. They had Mathurin all year. Shepard was better. Walker emerges a bit. It's different, but still good. This year, it's trending in the wrong direction again. This year, there's obviously a billion external factors that we'll get to. It looks much different as a unit. But so many games recently have been defined by that time in between when Siakam subs out for the first time and back in for his stint with the bench. He plays with the bench for his second of his 3 stints in every game. And so I wanted to figure out if there's more to this than injuries. That's certainly part of it. Like, you can't bury that with any Pacers thing this season. And I really wanted to dive in to see what is actually going on, because at a first glance, it's very obvious. You could just search by plus minus. Go back and look at last year. The Pacers bench was basically dead even in plus minus. That's great. If you have a good starting lineup and your bench does not blow leads, that's good. You're going to win a lot of games. This year's Pacers bench plus minus is 28th in the NBA. 28th, bleeding like 4 points a game. That is obviously very bad. Now, the problem is they rely on their depth a lot. Last year, you'd think, if I asked you, did the Pacers use their depth a lot last season, 2024-25, you'd probably say yes. I would have said yes if you asked me. They were 19th in bench minutes last season. This year, they're 4th in bench minutes. They're relying on their bench a little more. Some of that's that they have to sub out their centers more often than last year, certainly, but they're using their reserves more often and yet getting way less production just on points alone. Last year's group, which was 19th in total minutes off the bench, was 7th in scoring. This year's group, which is 4th in minutes, you'd think they'd be high on the points list. They're 14th, right? So opposite trends there. They're playing more and scoring less. And I think that is a good place to start. And a healthy place to start is the offense is just a mess as things fall apart, right? And that's not surprising, but think how many, if you listen every day, you've heard me say this, so many times when the Pacers bench comes in recently, and especially in the games when Jarris Walker does not start, and they mix and match. It's not a full bench group ever, but some combination of pre-Mathurin returning was like McConnell, Shepard, Walker, Nesmith, Siakam, whoever their center was. Some of those guys are on the floor. And that's like a good defensive unit. And even if that group can't really score, which you're seeing the Pacers bench have some struggles with, they can at least get enough stops that the game stays close enough. And you might be thinking like, well, why does it matter? Is this actually leading to wins? Yeah, they're playing better. Like this calendar month, they had won 5 out of 9 entering their last game. 5 out of 10 is a good stretch for them. They're actually playing better right now. And this bench thing felt like a real thing on defense, but their offense is just horrid. And it's so obvious that that's the answer. You can feel it. But when you really dive into the numbers, you have to grit your teeth at how shocking it is to see. I mean, I just talked about the points. They're 28th in scoring. As you'd expect with a team that is very low in effective field goal percentage, the Pacers' second unit players are 27th in just raw field goal percentage, only ahead of Portland, Brooklyn, and Cleveland. And in 3-point percentage, they're 26th. They can't make shots, right? In rebounds, pretty good. 6th best rebounding bench in the league. In assists, 8th, despite not making any shots. They don't have that many they have like a highish amount of turnovers, but not a crazy amount. They get about an average amount of steals. Like every other box score stat, they're 6th in blocks. Every other box score stat is going okay. They're trying to find ways to be productive, and they are, except for the thing where you take the ball and you shoot it, and it goes through the net. To Taurean Prince this. That has not happened for the bench groups. And you can see that in just about every way I tried to go slice through, like, okay, where is this going wrong? What do the numbers say the problem is for this? It's everything. For example, so they have 4 players who have started basically all of their games this year. The Pacers do. Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, Bennedict Mathurin, and Aaron Nesmith. Mathurin has not started once. There have been some on and off with those guys. But those 4, significant majority of the games they've started. With 2 or fewer of those players on the floor, the Pacers are minus 270 in 1,521 minutes. That's horrible. In those minutes, they could have both Siakam and Nembhard on the floor, by the way, in these minutes I'm talking about. In these minutes that I'm currently referencing, they have a 107 offensive rating and a 115.3 defensive rating. That's an okay defensive rating. League average is like mid-114s. Right? Barely below average on defense. So that speaks to what I'm saying. It feels like when they sub, they have a good enough, not good, but good enough defensive lineup on the floor. They can't score at all. 107 offensive rating is god-awful. Absolutely horrible. Near the worst, if not the worst in the league. And that's the Pacers. They have the worst offense in the league. And then I did it again. I ran the same thing and added in no J Huff. He started more than half his games, but has not started like 19 times this year. With no Huff, minus 164 in 960 minutes, 109.9 offensive rating, so a little bit better, a little bit worse on defense, aka exactly what you'd expect Huff's impact to be, 117.6 defensive rating. Regardless of the defense getting a little worse, that offense is still 5 points below league average. The bench groups for the Pacers cannot score. They absolutely can't score, and it is killing them. It is killing them in so many games this year. And, of course, the results are not important for the Pacers, but they need to know, like many things, or at least have some confidence that their bench might be decent next year. And that is why you need to dive into the why. Last numbers to throw at you. Last year's Pacers, their starting lineup, all 5 starters on the floor, 7th best net rating, with 4 or more starters on the floor. With 4 starters on the floor, 5th best net rating. And then they were wobbly with 3, 2, and 1. They had about average net ratings, 20th with 3 starters, 17th with 2, and 19th with 1. Slightly below average last year. That's a good enough bench when you have really good opening 5s. This year, obviously, they're not playing well with their starters. They're 20th in starters net rating. When they have 4 starters on the floor, they're 28th. When they have 3, they're 24th. When they have 2, they're last. When they have 1, they're 20th. Way worse. Way, way, way worse. No matter what happens, basically the second their starting 5 comes off the floor, they're going to be worse. And they just can't score. So why? Is it just like, well, yeah, it stinks, but next year things will be better, right? Because if the takeaway is that they can't score, how do they get more scoring with the bench? Obi Toppin would be great, right? That's so obvious. That's obviously the low-hanging fruit. Pluck it off. If they had one of their great bench players from last year on the bench this year, I guarantee you their bench would be better. Obi Toppin's very good. He's especially very good at the side of the ball that they could use him on for this exact thing. So some of you might just be shrugging and being like, yeah, it doesn't matter that the bench isn't good. But like, McConnell's still going to be with the bench next year. So Ben Shepherd's probably still going to be with the bench next year, pending transactional things with other players. If Ben Mathurin's on the team, he'll probably be coming off the bench next year. Who knows about these centers? Some of these centers could be their bench centers next year. So the centers is another part of this that they have all been rotating in and out. So even when the Pacers are the same level of healthy game by game, sometimes it's Potter with the second unit, sometimes it's Bradley, sometimes it's Jackson, occasionally it's Huff. It's like that is also somewhat different, and we'll get to the other obvious changes in a second. So the front court has been just a huge shocking difference from last year. No Toppin, Thomas Bryant, super healthy all year after they traded for him. He played a bunch. He was very reliable outside of his three-point shooting kind of dipping around February last year. The second takeaway for me is no Tyrese Haliburton obviously hurts in some ways for the bench because guys have to step into bigger roles with a starting 5. So a good to useful bench player is starting because there's no Tyrese Haliburton. It's been Ben Mathurin for most of the season, but when he was hurt, it was Johnny Furphy, Jarris Walker, whatever, right? But also no Tyrese Haliburton means there's way less 2-point guard groups, and those groups just light up the basket, right? TJ McConnell and Nembhard together, Haliburton and Nembhard together, obviously. Those are great pairings. And Haliburton and Nembhard start, but it's really those McConnell duos. And they've been getting to them more recently this season. I should actually deep dive at some point into how often they're doing that compared to last year. But they can't. They don't have, especially with Quentin Jackson missing time this year, they haven't been able to get to that because they don't have the depth of the position to actually get to it. And that will come up later as a topic. I think that's hurt their bench offense quite a bit this year. Worse health obviously just means worse general play, especially when worse health means their bench has included the likes of, no offense to these players, they just were on the team for about 2 seconds when they were thrust into big roles. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, Monte Morris, Mac McClung, James Wiseman, Cody Martin, Garrison Matthews, I might have already said him. I mean, they're just constant guys who, none of them are bad, but they all are learning the offense in one day and then going out and playing. So all of this together has led to the Pacers bench being worse. It's up to you and the Pacers to determine, well, when Haliburton's back, is it just going to snap their fingers and they're going to be just fine next year? Or is there actual cause for concern with McConnell turns 35 this year? Their bench young guys, Walker's been better recently, but have been pretty up and down all year. They don't know who their backup five's even going to be next year, basically outside of Obi Toppin. There's some questions, albeit some young guys are playing better. And oh, by the way, there could be a rookie playing with that group next year. Who knows how good rookies are? Some rookies are just not very good. Some are very good. This year's rookie class is awesome. So these are the questions they have to answer, but the data is staring them in the face that their bench is bad. Their bench is very bad at scoring in particular, and they need to know if they are comfortable with their second unit at this level next year. Can it bounce back on offense? If it can't, they might need to figure out if they need to shift their starting five or add in a different kind of player. And we'll talk about that. Something to that effect. Another thing I want to get to, studying recent finals teams that were bad the next season. The Warriors in 2020, the Cavs in 2019. What did they do at the trade deadline? Can the Pacers learn anything from that? And then another rumor that we have to get to. It's all coming up here on Locked On Pacers.
I carry a lot of responsibility in my household. If something happened to me, there would be serious consequences. We have a mortgage. We got tuition. We got everyday bills. Those aren't going anywhere if something happens to me. And I know that's an overwhelming feeling, but I'm taking steps to protect my family by getting life insurance through Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast, easy, and 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. And as of March 2025, Business Insider named Ethos the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider. Ethos has 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot with over 3,000 reviews. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get your free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. That's ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. Ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. Application times and rates may vary.
And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen could be one of many teams. Locked On Cavs, Locked On Warriors, they're about to come up, or Locked On Kings. You'll see why at the end. Those are trade teams that will be on your topic list for the rest of today. So here's what I wanted to do. I like to keep coming at this trade deadline for the Pacers. It's so unique. They were so great last year. They're so awful this year. The Wizards won on Tuesday night. So the Pacers are back to having the worst record in the league. Right? Even people who want the Pacers to win right now can at least understand that that's very good, right? They're back to the worst record in the league, but they were very good last year, so they probably shouldn't just be selling off parts. They definitely shouldn't be selling off parts. But what level should they be buyers, right? There's all these confusing questions. So there's a lot of interesting angles to take to kind of case study through this, and I hope I've given you a lot to think about. The one I wanted to do today was, fortunately or unfortunately, recent NBA history has provided some fascinating examples of teams to look at, because there have in NBA history been 8 teams before this year that have made the finals one year and then won less than 40% of their games the following year. The Pacers are trending to be the 9th. And of those 8 teams, all of them were 1976 or before, except for 2, which were super recent. They were before this CBA, but you know both of them. The 2018 Cavs, 2018-19 Cavs, after they lost the finals, and everybody knows why they were bad, LeBron left. And the 2019 Warriors, 2019-20 Warriors, who everybody knows why they were bad, KD left, kind of. KD left, Clay got hurt, and then 5 games in, Steph gets hurt. those teams stunk. And so I wanted to look back. What did they do? Right? What did they do? Because there are different kind of case studies, and we'll get into the why, for the Pacers to look at, and they did different things as a result, and then they got different things out of it as a result too. So on one hand, when I started this, I thought the Warriors would be more instructive, right? Because they were in a, the term that everybody used before the year, they were in air quotes, a gap year, right? The Cavs lost LeBron. He's not coming back. They're not going to just be good the next year. The Warriors were going to get Steph back, and they thought they were going to get Clay back. And, they were just kind of shuffling the chairs to see what happened. It felt more apt to me to start with them. And they did end up winning a championship 2 years after that. So first of all, they did something that I mentioned the Pacers could do. I don't know how many roster spots they'll have, if they'll even have a chance to do this, but I've talked about Tony Bradley's 10-day contract expires after tonight. The Pacers just cycling through young guys on 10 days just to get a look at them until they decide what they want to do with their 15th roster spot. The Warriors in this season, Dragan Bender, Michael Mulder, Chasson Randall, Jeremy Pargo, and Zach Norvell all got 10 days, right? They were like trying everybody to see what they could look at. You're not interested in that, but like that is to me what the Pacers should eventually consider doing with their 15th roster spot. Okay. Trades that Warriors team made. So obviously going into the season, they did the Nets thing. Kevin Durant was kind of a sign and trade. They got D'Lo out of that. So that is out. That sets the scene because they have this like kind of interesting 1 year window of a trade exception, or he's kind of a walking trade exception, all that. So the second thing they did was they traded away Glenn Robinson III, a former Pacer, and Alec Burks to the Sixers for a protected first-round pick and future second-rounders. So at the time, I mean, remember, some Pacers fans thought Glenn Robinson III should start for the Pacers instead of Bojan Bogdanovic. Like, he was a decent rotation-level wing and didn't end up panning out very much for the Sixers. Alec Burks is still kicking right now. They were viewed as two rotation-quality players. And the Warriors were not going to need them the following season. They had just gotten Andrew Wiggins, which we'll get to in a second. They traded them away for a first and a second. They also traded D'Angelo Russell, Omari Spellman, and Jacob Evans for Andrew Wiggins, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. And then early in the season, they traded Willie Cauley-Stein for a second. What does that say to you? Right? They got other centers in the door. They had Kevon Looney. They had other dudes. They drafted James Wiseman in the next draft. They traded away D'Lo because they have all these other guards, and they traded away young players that weren't tied down for draft picks. Obviously, Andrew Wiggins was a big part of this, but they got very little back. I guess if you count Wiggins, who became an all-star for them, that sounds, it feels like I'm skipping over that. I don't mean to. He was not thought of that at the time. If you remember, that trade was thought of as a salary dump by Minnesota to get off of Wiggins' contract using that first-round pick. They got draft picks. They get stuff that they did not feel like was tied down. They did not trade it away for another player that they'd have to fit in or that they weren't sure about the fit of. They went the route of picks. And I think that's interesting because I do think there is 4 Pacers players who maybe you don't think of as tied down for their long-term future. I'm not going to tell you who that could or couldn't be. Just you pick in your head. There's obviously value to moving them for good talent if the Pacers can do it. But if they can get draft equity and then they can use that stuff to, in the future, trade for their center that they need to start or other pieces that are important to the core of their team, that's obviously not a stupid thing to do. And that's what the Warriors opted to do. And they've had all these pieces to make, important salary trades in the future or actually make the draft picks. Like, that route was fascinating. And I don't think that's a bad thing for the Pacers to learn, right? If they don't get the right players right now, but they figure out what they might think is available in the summer or whatever that is, but they still, anything they view as superfluous or something that they don't think will be in their rotation next year, but they can get positive draft value for, they might consider that. Maybe they should consider that. And so if that kind of trade happens, I will go cite the 2019-20 Warriors as a team the Pacers, learned something from and made a trade from. The 2018-19 Cavs, they're more rebounding-y. They're not a rebuilding-y, whatever you want to say. They're not in a gap year. LeBron is gone. And yet it feels like their season, not more fitting of what the Pacers might do, but just they did a lot more stuff, right? They start the season. They trade Kyle Korver for Alec Burks and 2 second-rounders. They get 2 seconds along the way. They got Matthew Dellavedova and John Henson and 2 seconds and a first, kind of a salary dump, for Sam Decker, George Hill, and a second-rounder. That was a trade with the Bucks. They traded Rodney Hood to the Blazers for Nick Stauskas, Wade Baldwin, and 2 second-rounders. They got Marquise Chris and Brandon Knight, and a first and a second along the way. Another trade where they sent out those players they got from Portland, Wade Baldwin, Nick Stauskas, Alec Burks, and a second. So they just said, okay, here's the stuff we don't have tied down. Kyle Korver doesn't help us in a rebuild, right? And that's what makes this different than the Pacers. They're trading Rodney Hood, good player, does not help us in a rebuild. So they sent him away. And they got the same thing the Warriors did. They got picks. They aimed for picks. They did something the Pacers can't do. Well, maybe. We'll get to the difference in a second. They took on some considered bad salaries, right? Dellavedova and John Henson, for example. The Warriors kind of did that with Wiggins. They certainly did. He ended up being better. I don't want to revise history too much there. But they took on a lot of salary, and they got picks for it. And oh, by the way, if you'll remember, the Pacers ended up getting Nick Stauskas, Wade Baldwin, and a second rounder and waived Ike Anigbogu to do it. Shout out to those of you who remember that. That is a different version of what the Pacers could consider that I've talked about, which is the Pacers, currently about $5.5 million from the luxury tax. What if they use that distance and then using either their mid-level exception or their Haliburton trade exception, bring in a player who makes $5.5 million or less and get a pick that way? That's another way to use their roster space available to them, their salary space available to them, and get something. Both of the teams, the Warriors and the Cavs, opted to get draft capital in their situation. They were both going different directions. You can see the Cavs selling off veterans, whereas the Warriors were kind of trading away unproven young guys to get them. And I think that's certainly noteworthy, but both did do that. They ended up, the Cavs the following year, picking Darius Garland, Kevin Porter Jr., and Dylan Windler in the first round. So I found this actually pretty instructive. Both teams went the route of, they did not bring back a player that unless you count Wiggins as that. And I Wiggins ended up being good, so it's hard to kind of remember what that trade felt like at the time. But people felt like Wiggins was super overpaid on a max contract in Minnesota and wasn't playing particularly well. And then he became an all-star and is quite good now. But if you count him, sure, the Warriors got a long-term player on their team, and maybe they thought he'd be in their rotation. He's not bad. They got a first-round pick for it, though, which was more important to them. I believe that was the Jonathan Kuminga pick. And so in retrospect, I think both teams with different kinds of assets identified that they should go get draft capital, even if it's just small stuff. And I think the Pacers, even if it's sending away some of their extra stuff for extra draft picks, or if it's taking in a little bit of money to do so, I don't think that's a bad way for their deadline to go. And I do think that these teams can be instructive in how that ended up working out for them. The Cavs ended up being quite good. A few years later, the Warriors won a title. A few years later, and that is your takeaways from those teams. One more trade thing to get to today. Locked On Kings. James Ham, a new host, reporting about Keon Ellis and connects the Pacers to the Kings. Again, we'll talk about that to close out today's Locked On Pacers. But first, everybody, we got to talk about two great groups of people. First up is FanDuel. It's the last call for FanDuel for football. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season comes to a close. It's Super Bowl 60. FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everybody's been waiting for, where predictions turn into plays, stats into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer on FanDuel, bet just $5, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. If you win, make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. It's the last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl Sunday. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're also going to quickly talk about TurboTax. Tax season is here. It doesn't just have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms. Work with you to get every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it for a limited time. You can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If an expert doesn't file for you last year, just file for them now by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate. Get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Hoosiers. They beat Purdue in basketball. Finally, this new era of IU basketball got a signature win. Purdue not playing very well at the moment. Their defense looks a little flimsy. That was a weird game. You tried to blow up, but they got it done. Locked On Hoosiers. We'll have more. What a time for IU sports. Crazy time as a grad. But I love Purdue basketball, admittedly. Okay. James Ham is our new host here in the Locked On Podcast Network for Locked On Kings. And he did a reporting episode about the Kings ahead of the trade deadline, talked about some of their players who could be moved and who's interested in them potentially. He did a lot of source reporting. It was very good. And one such connection he made is one that has been made elsewhere this season. It was Keon Ellis, who, per my own notes here, let me find it. Keon Ellis was reported by Michael Scotto as a guy that the Pacers have had interest in this season. Unclear which side brought Jarris Walker up, he reported at one point, but that was a talk at one point. I would not trade Jarris Walker for Keon Ellis, to be clear. But James Ham just connected them too. And instead of just reciting what he said, we work for the same network. Here's what James Ham said about Keon Ellis and the Pacers.
And to be honest with you, Keon hasn't had a great year. It's unfortunate, but all of this has muddied up his game. The Kings offense is not running well. They're not able to take advantage of his 3-and-D ability. He's a guy who shoots 42% for his career, but this year he's down. He's down to around 36, 37%, and that's mainly because he's not getting the opportunities or the open looks he was before. Now, I know for a fact that there are tons of teams that have called the Sacramento Kings on Keon Ellis. And according to my sources, here's a couple of names that you need to keep in mind. The Minnesota Timberwolves, the Indiana Pacers, the Boston Celtics, and the New York Knicks, from what I have heard, have all called on Keon Ellis. So that's what I got so far on Keon Ellis. Again, any team that trades for Keon Ellis, they have the opportunity to go and sign Keon to an extension on February 9th. That at least gives the team some leverage when coming to an agreement. I think the Kings would also be more than willing to allow another team to have a conversation with Keon Ellis's agent and figure out what an extension might look like before they make a trade. Again, Keon Ellis, 26 years old. He probably fits the player arc of this team that's going to move forward, but he's kind of at the back end of that. And if the Kings can't move off of other contracts right now, number one, it would block Keon from playing again next year. And number two, they don't even have the money to sign him anyways. They're already really close to the luxury tax next season, even if because they have Keegan Murray's his extension kicking in, and it's going to cost a ton of money for Keegan for next season. So this is super complicated, but realistically, I think we're seeing the last game or two of Keon Ellis in Sacramento as a King. He's a great young player who just has a great spirit about him. Really, really good guy behind the scenes. I think Kings fans should wish him well and hope that he goes somewhere and gets his money, because at the end of the day, that's why these guys go out there and put their bodies on the line.
So I find all that very interesting. Obviously, Keon Ellis is good. Let's start there. He listed all the reasons why he might be available, which was, I included that. And I should have said this before. I cut that up. That was not continuous 2 minutes of him. There's other parts in that segment, but I think he did a good job laying out, even though he's a good player, why he might be available and what his future could look like. And to be clear, he would be good for the Pacers. He's a good player. He can defend. He can kind of shoot. He's pesky, right? Another link to the same player. So here's the question I'd have. I would think personally, because I think Keon Ellis is a decent player, there's all these questions in Sacramento about why he's not playing. If you trade for Keon Ellis, any team, Pacers or anybody, you're probably doing that because you want him to play for your team, probably even beyond this season. If you're trading for him for this year, you're a contender. The Pacers are not a contender. They are not a team that should be traded because his contract is expiring. James said he's extension eligible. Trading something small to have him on the team does the Pacers no good if they don't know he's extending, right? And so you'd have to think a trade like that is A, for future seasons, and B, to have him play. And my thought has always been the same. I've said this a few times. Center is obviously the thing that everybody's going to talk about for the Pacers with trades. Thing B is, and the thing I've said is, if they go for any other thing that I'd be thinking about, more wings is always good, whatever. But they kind of, I still think, need another guard, another depth guard. With TJ McConnell's age becoming a question, Quentin Jackson's out of two-way eligibility. Will he be on the team next year? They tried to bring in point guards this year. Monte Morris was on the team. Campaign. DeLon Wright didn't work. Mac McClung was a backup guard at one point. Didn't work. Right? They tried. They want guard depth. Clearly, they want to play 2-point guards. Haliburton's going to be back next year. Is he going to play every game? Is he going to be healthy all the time? Who knows? So there's good sense in having another point guard. Keon Ellis is good, but certainly probably to me overqualified to just be a depth point guard. Like he should play for a team. He's valuable. And B, more importantly, perhaps for the Pacers specifically, next year, the Pacers will have some of these guys will not be on the team, but most of these players will be back. Maybe all of them. Tyrese Haliburton, Andrew Nembhard, TJ McConnell, Aaron Nesmith, Ben Shepherd, Johnny Furphy, Jarris Walker, Bennedict Mathurin, whoever they draft, Cam Jones, and Quentin Jackson. Some question marks in there, certainly. Many question marks, possibly. But regardless, that's a lot of names in your perimeter rotation as the Pacers. Where does Keon Ellis slot in? Is there guaranteed minutes for him on the team? A lot of guys would have to be moved before he'd even play. And so if his role is really small for the Pacers or non-existent at all, what would that make his value to them? Probably not particularly high, unless they're sending out rotation players in return. And then what are you really doing, right? So I do get why the Pacers would have interest in Keon Ellis for the right. You could say this about any player for the right price. Yeah, he's somebody that would pursue. I like that James said, yeah, they reach out to his agent now. Like that's obviously a big part of this. But this one now, I'm kind of like, I don't know that that's the right type or the right level of player for the Pacers to pursue. And that is today's trade updates. We'll do another one of these later this week. Michael Scotto, NBA insider for Hoops Hype's going to join us for Friday's episode to talk Pacers ahead of the trade deadline. And tomorrow, of course, we're talking Pacers Bulls. The Pacers are back home. They're finally playing a game in Indiana. They're not snowed in, stuck somewhere. It's going to be fun. We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Pacers. You can find me on social media at Tony R. East and this podcast at Locked On Pacers. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you very soon.